The voters gave us the balance of power. And so we go there to represent the 3.5 million people who voted for us. And we have to say to those people, we can't get everything we want, because if we wanted everything we wanted, we had to get 50% plus one of the vote. And we have to compromise now and again because we didn't get enough votes. If you don't want us to compromise, give us more votes. And in fact, there are two parties that can bring down the government, and so two major coalition partners in the GNU are the DA.
I mean, Fikile Mbalula did say that the DA was aware that there was these bills as you went into government with the ANC. Does the DA feel trapped that they were put in ministerial positions where they had to implement policies that they would normally be against? I'm talking about the issue of the Bella Act. We see CVW is there, and also now within the issue of this expropriation bill. I'm just trying to, and also, is it not mischievous for the minister to say he won't be implementing policies simply because she is from the DA? I mean, he's a minister of everyone. It's just not a DA minister. And also, with Helen, you just said that they if the more people are in a coalition, the more unstable it becomes. Would you have rather had the ANC and ousted the others in the GNU to totally just have a two-party coalition?
Right. As you all know, the GNU is a coalition, is a form of coalition. Now, in a normal coalition, you have a situation, a starting situation, where no party got 50% plus one of the vote, and they would like to get above 50%, so they look for coalition partners to bring them above 50%. And once they've got above 50%, they want to have the stability. They don't want to have too many partner parties, but it's often very useful to have a reserve outside, that if your partner party gives you a lot of trouble inside the coalition, you can have plan B. That's what I learned very much during the coalitions that I managed. However, when we signed the statement of intent, which was in itself a huge education for me, clause 24 said that the original signatories to the statement of intent would have to be agreed amongst themselves before new people could join this government of national unity. And that was in clause 24. If you read it, I haven't got the word for word in my head, but it basically says, for the people who agree to come into this, and that's when we signed it, if any people are added, or if any parties are added, it'll have to be in consultation with each other. And at that time, and at the time that we elected President Ramaphosa as president of the country, because that was when the statement of intent became operable, there were three founding parties. There was the DA, there was the ANC, and there was the Inkatha Freedom Party. Within 4 or 5 days, the president was announcing all sorts of other people who joined, without any respect for clause 24, as if it didn't exist. And I could only conclude to myself, either they couldn't care that it exists, or they don't know that it exists, or they're doing whatever they want anyway. And that was our first huge red light, that the ANC wasn't taking this seriously and was just continuing as if they could call the shots entirely. And you may remember that I was on television with Fikile Mbalula, and I pointed this out to him, and a lot of people didn't like that I did point it out to him, of course. So, the only parties that can actually bring down the government are the DA and the ANC. Every other party in the government is there by grace and favor of President Ramaphosa. And if you are a minister or a deputy minister or a chair of a committee or whatever it is you are, you have to please President Ramaphosa, because he is the person who holds your fate in his hands. And of course, that's why the ANC wants a whole lot of smaller parties, because then they have a little hallelujah chorus that supports them on everything that they do. And it's very convenient with the ANC not always to have to fight with us. They get their proxies to fight with us. And then it looks different. But their proxies, of course, are going to side with the ANC, no matter what they said in the election, because Ramaphosa can relieve them from their positions. Now, we are not there by grace and favor of the president. We are there by grace and favor of the voters. The voters gave us the balance of power. And so we go there to represent the 3.5 million people who voted for us. And we have to say to those people, we can't get everything we want, because if we wanted everything we wanted, we had to get 50% plus one of the vote. But we're in a coalition to share power, and so don't get upset with us when we have to compromise now and again, because we didn't get enough votes. If you don't want us to compromise, give us more votes. But the ANC has to say that too. And the existence of what I call the Hallelujah Chorus does not mean to say that they have any muscle in government, but it's very useful for the ANC, as we saw in the clearinghouse. I won't go into that, but in the clearinghouse. And in fact, there are two parties that can bring down the government, and so two major coalition partners in the GNU are the DA and the ANC. The JP Smith thing. Okay, JP Smith, right. The suspension of people who have been raided by the police. Now, Jordan Hill-Lewis is the mayor of Cape Town, and he has had to determine whether to suspend. I think so far it is 4 councillors who have been accused of infringements that might warrant suspension. And on each occasion, he has looked at the prima facie evidence against that person. Now, I'll take the example of the most common issue that's been raised, and that is the example of Malusi Boy, who was arrested and now charged on several quite serious counts of corruption involving housing projects. After Malusi's office was searched, the police had a discussion with Jordan, and Jordan said, as a courtesy, could I know what the prima facie evidence is, untested evidence is, that you have against him, so that I can see whether this is a political hit squad or whether there is some real substantive stuff to which he has to answer. The police weren't obliged to do that, but they said, yes, there's a lot of substantive stuff. And untested evidence, but prima facie evidence, convinced the mayor that there was a serious case that Malusi had to answer, and he therefore suspended him. In another case where there was an allegation that an electricity meter had been bypassed of a house belonging to one of his mayoral executive committee members, he went into it. It was a fact that it had been bypassed. He suspended him, but then the member could prove that other people lived there and that they had done that even though the house was in his name. So then he was reinstated, obviously. But there was a prima facie case against him because in a house owned by him, the electricity meter had been bypassed. In another case, somebody was accused of rape, and Jordan was convinced that there was no prima facie evidence, and there was a very convincing argument that it might have been a revenge motive. And so he said, we'll wait for the court case to run its course. We won't be the jury and judge. It's a criminal trial, and the person was acquitted. So Jordan made the right decision. And in another case that I'm not so familiar with the details of. So all I know is that Jordan looks at what evidence there is, and he's doing exactly the same with the J.P. Smith case. In the J.P. Smith case, he's asked the police to extend to him the same courtesy as they extended to him with Malusi Boy. And he says before he takes a decision to suspend, he's got to check whether this is a political hit squad or whether there's something genuine. And he then says, give me a briefing on the prima facie evidence that still has to be tested in court that is untested now, but I, as the responsible mayor, have to see if he's got a genuine case to answer. And that briefing, I understand, should be happening about today, and Jordan will make that decision on the basis of what he sees before him. Now, if you compare every other case that has been raised around issues, we demand that people be suspended when we believe there's prima facie evidence of wrongdoing, either in a past job or whatever there is, as for example with Minister Nchaveni, and we are very wary of being mindful that political hit squads in politics are not unusual. When I was the mayor of Cape Town, they accused me, now listen to this, it still boggles my mind to this day, of using council funds to spy on our coalition partners and members of my own party. Something more far-fetched you couldn't find. But that was a political hit squad. And because they knew they could never ever charge me in court, they set up the Erasmus Commission to discredit me. That was a political hit squad. So I'm telling you, you've got to be careful in politics. And Jordan is going about it in exactly the right way, saying, I want to see the prima facie evidence, untested. It's a courtesy. The police don't have to show him, but he's got to make a solid judgment.